I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker. Parents and teachers would love to help hurting kids, but the truth is they don't know how. Why? The reason's quite simple. Bullying has completely transformed in less than a decade. Today, bullying has no boundaries. When the bell rings, kids might leave their school campuses, but they can never escape the other world, a world where mockers and imitators thrive. Ironically, they carry a getaway to that world right in their pockets because they see that world as an avenue of escape, but in reality, it's putting them in bondage. Jonathan McKee is the author of over 20 books, including the brand new Bullying Breakthrough, The Teen's Guide to Social Media and Mobile Devices, The Guy's Guide to God, Girls, and the Phone in Your Pocket, and the new fiction book Bystander about a school shooting on a high school campus. He has over 20 years youth ministry experience and speaks to parents and leaders worldwide, all while providing free resources for parents on his website, thesource4parents.com. Jonathan, along with his wife Lori and their 3 kids, live in California, here to talk about his new book, The Bullying Breakthrough, Real Help for Parents and Teachers of the Bullied, Bystanders, and Bullies, is Jonathan McKee. Jonathan, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Hey, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Well, this is such an important subject. I want to kind of start out by taking you back to little Jonathan. I don't know whether you went by Johnny or John, or what did they call you back in the early days?
Depends, either Jonathan or John.
Okay. And what kind of environment did you grow up in? Was it a faith-based home? Was it where you were mentored? Did you have the normal childhood, or was there something extraordinary about your childhood that made you kind of want to devote your life to this kind of ministry?
Well, no, a great question. I actually grew up as a pastor's kid in a pretty conservative home, and mom and dad were amazing and open communication channels. But it was interesting as I lost my baby teeth and the big teeth came in. As you saw on the back of that cover there, we actually put a picture of me as a 3rd grader. The teeth came in big time, and to the point where I wasn't just some kid with a little bit of buck teeth. When I walked in a room, people turned and went, "Whoa!" And little kids would stop in the grocery store and be like, "Mom, what's wrong with his teeth?" And moms would be like, "Shh, don't say that out loud," And the bullying got really bad. And as much as the channels of communication were open in my home, it was embarrassing to me. It was something I didn't want to talk about. I didn't come home and tell mom and dad, "Oh, I had a terrible day. People were knocking my books off the desk again," and this, because it just got to be a thing where a lot of teasing happened in this. And it's funny, interviewing so many people who are enduring bullying today, the one thing they feel is alone. And a lot of them feel like there's nobody I could tell about this. It was embarrassing. Or they felt if they did, it would be quickly minimized, or, "Oh, no, they didn't do that," or they'd be scrutinized. "Well, what did you do to provoke them?" So it's a tough world out there, and it was definitely, that was a rough start for me.
How did you find a way to cope with it? What was it? What resources? If you didn't talk about it, then there was no support system. You internalized it. This went into the realm of shame, and shame is a debilitator. It is one that robs you of your real personality. It becomes a mask that you have to wear in order to just cope with the circumstances, and then you find a way to run as far away from those circumstances as you possibly can. How was it for you, and how did you cope with all this?
Sure. I mean, and you talk about running away, it seems like the response is typically flight or fight. I ended up doing one or the other. I was suspended every year that I can remember going up to school for getting in a fight. My flight, my defense mechanism was humor. I could always make kids laugh. And a lot of it was self-deprecating humor. Other times it was, they would say something and I would start, throwing insults back, which sometimes led to the fighting. But that was one of the things I learned, because for me, I had to figure out some way to defend myself. But the thing that's interesting is what it also does to you is it makes you skeptical of people. It makes you bitter. So by the time I was middle school, the teeth problem was solved, but I still was having a problem with people. And frankly, that was on me because for me, one thing that happens, and I see this happen with bullied kids a lot, is when your books are knocked off your desk every day, when you're slapped in the back of the neck in gym class, hung in a locker, when all these things happen, it's you start to become pretty skeptical of people. You have a dark view of humanity as it is, and so even when people aren't talking about you, you see people talking across the room. And as I interviewed people for this book, they were like, there was times I figured, oh, those people were talking about me, and I identified so much. I said, I remember that. I remember feeling that, and so it made me actually very socially awkward, and that happens very often. And because of that, I struggled in relationships, and by the time I was middle school, the bullying got so bad, and I just kind of repelled people with my attitude, with this and that. There was a group of individuals that actually started a Kill John Club. They made T-shirts. They put a gun scope on my head on the T-shirt and put KJC because they wouldn't write Kill John Club on the T-shirt. And here's where I learned something else about bullying. When I went and told the teacher, I finally was like, man, these kids, they did this, they made T-shirts. And she said, well, first of all, she said, no, they didn't. She denied that it even happened. I'm like, no, look, there's the T-shirt. And then she says, you just ignore them and they'll ignore you. Well, it's hard to ignore the classroom when the entire classroom's laughing at you. So it was a rough ride.
So here you are, a pastor's kid, and you're
Yeah.
struggling with all of this at the same time, a home where the Bible is preeminent, your father's in the pulpit, and you feel uh, you're God's chosen. You're hearing these messages from mom and dad that you are fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God, and you're picturing God looking like Bugs Bunny, not God looking at the omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient God that He is. We project onto God an image. Your image. Listen, my middle name is Elmer, so carry that moniker with you in the lifetime of Elmer Fudd, and the door's wide open. I don't know what my parents were thinking, but it certainly wasn't about the fact that there was going to be a cartoon character that I was going to be called for many years of my life. But
Well, I was called Bugs Bunny, so we're in good company.
well, there you go. You're the wascally wabbit, and I'm the one that's after you with my shotgun. How did you reconcile this faith culture that you're in, that this message from mom and dad that God loves you and that you're fearfully and wonderfully made, and you're created in the image of God, and how did you fit into the faith model and even believing what they were telling you when you didn't see it manifested on earth? Were you treated the same way in church by the church kids?
No, and I tell you, that's one of the saving grace is that luckily at church, I didn't endure it as much. In church, people seemed to accept me more for who I was, especially adults. The short answer to your question is, how did I deal with this? Did I deal with it a healthy way? Absolutely not. Man, I tell you, I mean, there was a time in high school where I remember standing at the edge of a cliff, and I was just trying to find an answer of why not to jump off the edge. And it's one of those things where, when you are every day mocked, it is, you can't even describe what it does to you. And as I interviewed people, even for this book, and asked the questions, the pain that obviously haunts these people. One guy said, he said, there's a guy I haven't seen in 15 years who I hate, because he literally replays these instances in his mind. The interesting fact is that today, the reach of bullying is so much further because of, even as you said in the intro, young people carrying devices in their pockets. We now, as of 2012, America crossed the 50% mark for carrying smartphones in their pockets. According to Pew Research's most recent report, 95% of teenagers have access to a smartphone. According to Common Sense Media's most recent report, it's actually 89% who own smartphones. So your typical young person today has got social media in their pocket. And so where when you and I went home, maybe there was that safety. When I went to church, maybe that was a place where I was accepted. Now bullying's reach is so much further because social media is now providing an avenue for bullying. And sadly, a lot of moms and dads, you know, really don't know what's going on in those devices. They allow those devices in the kids' bedrooms. So at 10 at night, at midnight, at 2 a.m., while the kid is waking up and checking their phone, and the research is out there, they are, they're all of a sudden bullying's reach is now at midnight and 2 a.m. in a place that used to be safe, the bedroom, and it's not safe from bullying anymore. Kids that are cyberbullied are the most likely to attempt suicide. Kids who are bullied are twice as likely compared to a normal kid. Cyberbullied 3 times as likely because the reach is so far. I was on campus a couple days ago and I was talking about this, and in this world today, it's amazing how bullying actually kind of crosses with even the sexting and the other stuff that's going on. And the typical situation is like a teenage girl is maybe pressured by her boyfriend to send that sexy pic. And what ends up happening is when they break up, the boyfriend takes that pic that was sent and sends it to everybody and says, look at this girl, look what she did. And she's shunned, isolated. We've seen so many suicide attempts, girls who've completely had to change schools, everything. This is at every school I visit. I literally on campus yesterday, and I talked to a principal and I said, so tell me, and sure enough, I heard a story of that exact same thing. Every campus I'm on has a story like that. This is the reality of bullying today.
Well, it's epidemic, and we hear these stories about the extremes of the responses to bullying. One is suicide. The other is take a gun, walk into a school, and open fire.
Yeah.
Those are the extremes of the response to bullying. And we have to look at it now as a social malady, as a crisis, and something that is no longer, well, you'll settle it on the playground. Now, in the 50s and 60s, I was bullied. I was the 98-pound weakling. I'm Jewish. We're not built big. We're not built with muscles. We could work out to our heart's content, and you're not going to find that we're going to be buff and I don't really know a well-defined, muscle-bound, six-pack, big arms Jewish guy in my entire life of almost 67 years. So we're not the big guys. All right, we may be the smart guys, but we're not the big guys. I had an incident where I was being bullied, and it was the football players. And the football captain was a guy named Lou, and he happened to be Jewish, but he was part of that letter. That was back in the days of the Letterman's jacket and the Letterman's sweater, and that was a whole group of people. And they picked on me relentlessly. And one day they were on the practice field, and I decided I had it. I had enough of it. And I walked across the practice field, and they were in the middle of a huddle, and I walked right in the middle of the huddle, and I looked right at him. And all of a sudden you could hear the murmur, oh man, Walker is going to die. He's just going to get pounded. And I went up to Lou, and I said to Lou, and people were starting to kind of, circle around as they do, because they're about to watch the Lions 6, Christians nothing, the Gladiator just mop up the floor. And I don't know what possessed me, but here we were out on this dirt field, and I took my foot and I drew a line in the dirt. And I stood on one side and I pointed to him and I said, I dare you to cross this line. And then the fever pitch goes, come on, Lou, give it to him. Give it to him good. You know, he's asking for it. He came down here to get his punishment and his pounding, and you just wail on that boy. You know, if he's asking for it, you give it to him. And the moment Lou stepped over that line, I looked at Lou and I said, now you're on my side. And he gave me that RCA Victor look, that dog in the microphone, in the speaker look, kind of turning his head, kind of process that Scooby-Doo kind of look, kind of process what I just said to him. Now you're on my side. And he stopped, and this was not this dumb, unintelligent, hulk of a football player. This was an intelligent guy. Went on to have a professional ball career. So went on to college, graduated college. He wasn't stupid, all right? But I hit him at a point of intellect that somehow connected with him. And he patted me on the head and he said, you know, Walker, you're okay. And he turned around to the team and he said, nobody touches him. And you guys look out for him. And that was the end of it. Now you're on my side. Now, I was trembling. I don't know if I wet myself. I don't know what I was thinking, but it took every bit of me to leave my house, walk to the school with this in mind, that I was going to confront this, because I was absolutely terrorized by these guys that were much bigger than me, and I was so much smaller than them. I spent the money to order the chains from the back of the comic books, the hand grips from the back of the comic books. If you remember when you could send off $1.25 and $5 and you get a bodybuilding kit, with the ropes and the jump rope and all the stuff. And I spent every night pulling that 3 chains, trying to build up my chest and build my muscles. And there was just no way that was going to happen. That's not my DNA. That's not my physique. I did everything I could because I wanted to fight back, and I wouldn't tell my parents, and I wouldn't tell anybody. It was humiliating. It was embarrassing. It was just, and it was always done where, you know how they have a scout kind of looking at the end of each hallway to make sure no teacher is coming. And they always have somebody on the lookout before they do whatever they're going to do, and they're all in it together. And you know that there's no way out of this. Once you find yourself called out from the pack, they're going to pounce, and that's what they did. And I spent the next 3 years under the protection of the athletic mob, of the athletic bullies, who looked out for me and made sure that nobody picked on me, and was kind of considered to be, I don't know if they consider me to be a little special, but certainly the gravitas and the boldness to come confront them on the football field was what was the breaking point. Now, I wouldn't recommend that today to somebody to do, because they'll probably get pounded, because there's way too much physical violence in way too many centers. But this was the early 60s, and that just wasn't the culture. But I know what bullying feels like, and I know the shame of it. And I couldn't go to my father with a black eye or with a bloody lip and explain to him what happened, because there was no explanation that was reasonable. It was always, what did you do to provoke that? What did you do to start that fight? And I understand that whole dynamic because I lived it the same way you did. So there's a great deal of compassion there. Your book is vulnerable, and it gives a glimpse into your own personal struggle, not only as a child who was bullied, but as the parent of a child who was bullied so badly that he had to switch schools. So you're deeply entrenched in this issue personally. professionally, ministerially, and what was it that you found was the gaping hole in understanding about how to address this bullying issue?
Yeah, you know what? It's crazy. First of all, I mean, our world, I mean, this is so ripe for conversation because our world's dealing with it. Everybody's even asking. I mean, you turn on the news and somebody's starting some new bullying campaign because, anti-bullying, because they know it's a reality. So nobody's arguing that it happens. The question is always, what do you do about it? How do we respond? And I think that's the hard part for us as parents because especially when our kid, I mean, I grew up being bullied, but then when my kid was bullying, you're not rational at first. And I was interviewing all these parents and you end up talking with Mama Bear, whose cub was just messed with, And I mean, I remember when my son came home, it was fifth grade, he was being messed with. And the stories he was telling me about the cruelty he was enduring, I looked at my wife and I said, hey, call the cops or our lawyer. I don't know which, because I think I'm going to go down and kill some fifth graders. I'm going to start tossing them around because it's hard when you hear about your own flesh, your own child being absolutely targeted and the hate that happens. So that's one of the things that's tough for parents is the way we react, and we tend to overreact. And sometimes the reaction is either the what? Let's call the principal now. This will not happen, And every kid who was bullied, who I asked, said, when I said, well, did you tell anybody? No, why not? Because I knew they would freak out. That's what they always said. I knew they would freak out, or I knew it wouldn't help. Here's the other one. It would only make things worse. Story after story. And let me preface this with tons of friends who are principals, tons of friends who are teachers who are amazing, but it's amazing how many times I heard stories of I went to the principal and the principal called the other kids in the office and tell me what happened. Okay, well, this is ridiculous. You guys shake hands. Friends? Okay. Check off the list. Handled. And then and every time it was like, and then as the kids walked out or as they were in the bathroom later, I'm going to get you for that, for snitching, and it's like, are we truly not aware that this is what goes on? Are we this dense that we don't? I mean, so story after story, and that's one of the things I try to just share in this book is to kind of open our eyes to the reality that these kids who are bullied feel completely alone. That's the one, if there's one word to describe them, it would be alone. They feel like nobody can help, nothing could be done. And instead of overreacting as parents, sure, there's lots of things we could do. You heard me say, I mean, we end up changing schools. I've got a whole chapter on here's 10 ways you can build into the bullied kid. But the number one thing, and every psychologist will tell you this, every expert will tell you this, the number thing that we can do as parents is not freak out, but just listen. Notice and hear our kid. Help them feel noticed and heard. Take this kid that feels completely alone and give them an advocate, someone who's going to sit next to them. And you might not even have all the answers. You don't have to say, oh, well, let's do this, this, and this. You could say, I don't know what we're going to do, but I'm so glad you told me. Thank you for telling me. That must have hurt. Wow. I'm so sorry you had to endure that. It's empathy 101. Step into their shoes, make them feel noticed and heard. And that's where it starts. I'm not saying there's not things we can do. I'm not saying the principal shouldn't be called. I have a whole chapter in the book you saw it called Meet the Principal, Meet the Teacher, Meet the Parent. And there's things we can do, but it starts with validating our kid, helping them realize you're not alone, you're not insane. This does hurt. And please tell me about it. I want to hear about it. I'm here for you. That's where it starts. That lays the groundwork for everything else.
We're talking with Jonathan McKee, author of the newly released book, The Bullying Breakthrough, Real Help for Parents, Teachers of the Bullied, Bystanders, and Bullies. This is a topic which is driving kids to extremes. It is painful. It is crushing their identity. It is having them live a life of isolation and shame, taking them to the brink of suicide, or, as we've seen in many cases, to pick up a gun and walk into a school and open fire because they have reached a level of frustration where it has taken them over the edge because they feel so isolated, so attacked, and there are answers. And this book contains a tremendous resource of answers, as well as the websites, the source for parents.com, that also has resources for parents as well. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to dig into some of the tips that Jonathan has for us as parents, as teachers, as principals, as those who are bullied, and what we can do to help stem the tide of bullying and break through to the other side of this chronic social issue. We'll be right back. Shalom, I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and I've got a question for you. What do you think they're doing with your DNA? Oh, you know that 23andMe kit that you sent off, and you got back that report that told you you were Irish, you were French, you were Jewish? Wonder who's interested in that information. It's not like you've sent it off to a database with millions of other people and they can steal your identity, and who would really be interested in that information other than you? Well, maybe your friends and family, but there's one, yes, one, who is so interested in your DNA that it would be something that would make you afraid. And that is Satan himself. Why would Satan be interested in your DNA? Because there is a Y chromosome marker that determines whether or not you are in the line of Aaron. That's right, the biblical line of Aaron the priest. That's because if the priesthood comes back and the high priest takes his role as the head of the Sanhedrin, they will be the ones to call for the return of Jesus. Well, what can they do with your DNA? Well, there are 40-plus countries weaponizing DNA today. And imagine if Satan could weaponize your DNA and use that Y chromosome marker to take out the line of the high priest, then Jesus doesn't come back. That is the plot behind the best-selling book, The Codex, now out in second edition on Kindle, $2.99, also available in paperback. This is a biblical thriller beyond comparison that's going to take you on an incredible journey to understand what they could do with your DNA. I also want to encourage you to visit our website, ignitingnation.com, and click on special offers. There you're going to find the yellow cover of this book, The 7 Laws of Abundant Living, Lessons Learned from the Tree of Life. We're going to take you on a journey in the Garden of Eden to the seed, the ground, all the way out to the fruit that reveals things of the natural that God is trying to reveal supernatural truths. Contained within these pages are 7 laws and 7 lessons within each law. They're going to take you on an incredible journey of understanding about the life you live and the fruit you bear. I want to encourage you to click on that yellow cover. We're going to ask for your email. Now, we won't send you spam because spam is not kosher, but we will send you the first chapter of this book. I want to encourage you to get 7 Laws of Abundant Living, Lessons Learned from the Tree of Life. You can get it on Amazon, you can get it on Barnes & Noble, you can get it at Books A Million, wherever great Christian books are sold. Take this journey with me to the Tree of Life in the Garden of Eden, and to the Tree of Life we see again at the River of Life. Get your copy today. Shalom, I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and I've got a question for you. What do you think they're doing with your DNA? Oh, you know that 23andMe. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heart lines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Jonathan McKee, the author of the newly released book, The Bullying Breakthrough, Real Help for Parents and Teachers of the Bullied, Bystanders, and Bullies. Jonathan, welcome back to the program.
Yeah, cool. Good to be here.
Jonathan, you, in the early segment, talked about technology as being almost a WMD. It has become the private, personal, hidden realm that the child holds close to them. But parents have a responsibility to be actively engaged in what technology is being used for, how technology is being used, and have access to a certain amount of that information. A 9-year-old's privacy is one thing when it comes to mom and dad, you know, I need to be able to go to the bathroom by myself, versus the privacy that they want to invoke that says This is my phone, this is my website, this is my private place, and you're invading my privacy. And is that really the case?
Well, it's crazy because, there's been such this shift in the last decade, honestly. I mean, if you think of the greater history of parenting, things have changed so rapidly in the last 6 years alone. And, it started when a guy in jeans and sneakers walked on a stage and the place was Apple. And the guy stood out and he held up a device that looked kind of like this, but maybe just a hair smaller. And he said, "Today we're going to reinvent the phone." And when Jobs said that, he did exactly that. He took three things that young people loved: texting and communicating with their friends, social media, which at that time, back in 2007, was pretty much something that was plugged into a wall at that time. And then their entire entertainment media library, all the videos they watched, all the games they played. And he took it and he put it in one device. Well, America loved this device so much that by 2012, we crossed the 50% mark. And now in the last 6 years, we're all sitting around scratching our head and saying, is it a good idea that so many young people have these things in their pockets? And some of you guys probably even saw an article just a few weeks ago in New York Times about Silicon Valley tech, parents who work and do this every day, how they are instructing their nannies at home, do not let my kids watch screens, because they know the effect of screens. And in a world that literally where we are spending more time staring at a screen than we are with our spouse, with our loved ones, it's having an effect on this world. And for parents, when it comes to this issue of bullying, now that bullying's reach is so much greater and extends into the bedrooms, we need to start thinking of ways to actually combat cyberbullying, because its reach is greater, its punishment is worse. It's affecting the psyche of young people in a world where already anxiety and depression and everything is up, because we're walking around with a real-time barometer of our self-esteem right here. This thing tells us how many likes we have, how many friends we have. Oh, friends? Let me check how many friends I have. It's not a matter of who you're hanging out with. It's all right here. And even if you're the most popular kid in school, you aren't as popular as Kylie Jenner or Drake, or, and we saw in 1990s, we saw the value of wanting to be famous ranked number 14. Today, it's ranked as number 1. I want to be an Instagram celebrity. So this is a tough playing field for people. And some of the easy game and way to get there is by, stepping on the bodies of others. And when we step on the bodies of others and lower others, it's a power play. It's textbook bullying defined. Center for Disease Control defines bullying as aggressive power plays repeatedly. And when you see those 3 check boxes, it's not just teasing, but it's something aggressive. It's a power play. I'm lowering somebody else down, building myself up, and I'm doing it again and again. We start to see this happening, and there are definite steps that parents can take to combat this, because this is affecting young people so much. Cyberbullying is a reality, and there's things they can do.
In the steps that parents can take, should there be a requirement that when I give my child a phone and they get a Facebook account, that I insist that they friend me so that I can see what's going on their page?
Yeah, that's a step, one of many, but sadly that's one of the least things, because parents got to be aware. And the cool thing is that's a parent saying, hey, I want to at least see what's going on. But sadly, young people today, first of all, don't even want to be on Facebook because all their parents are on Facebook. So the first place they want to go is Snapchat and Insta. And with both Snapchat and Instagram, they can select who they're sending stuff to anyway. So a parent's never going to see any of that. So really, it's more of the dialogue that needs to take place, the education. It's finding resources where you have, and as a matter of fact, you and I talked on a previous show about my book, The Teen's Guide for Social Media and Mobile Devices.
Right.
That's a book a lot of parents have called their phone contract. Hey, read this book, and when you're done with this book, a book that talks about who you're friending, what are you posting, what are you streaming, and it talks about making good decisions in that area. We as parents need to have some of those conversations. For example, when it comes to cyberbullying, most experts will agree that that kids are on these devices way too young. Even the FTC has a thing called COPA, the Child Online Privacy Protection Act, which actually prevents Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, all the ones that young people like, and Facebook, which I don't even care for. Any of those social media outlets can't even allow people under 13 on those. Well, here's the crazy thing. You'll find story after story of 11, 12-year-old kids attempting suicide because they were harassed and targeted on social media. Why are they on social media when they're not even supposed to be on social media? In most cases, mom or dad either didn't even have a clue they were on social media or didn't even realize they weren't supposed to be on Snapchat, didn't realize that when they signed up for Snapchat, Snapchat asked for their age, and when they entered it in there, they said, sorry, you're too young. And their friend said, hey, stupid, just change your birth year. Oh, magically, now I'm 13. So the average age that a young person gets a smartphone today is 10.3 years old. That's just the average. So we got 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds getting phones. And the first thing they want is they want to be on those same apps that all their friends are on. So they want to get on that Snapchat. They want to get on Instagram. Now, I'm not saying these things are bad, but as moms and dads, one of the greatest things we can do is delay social media. And most of the experts out there, from Common Sense Media to, I mean, name it, Bill Gates says, I didn't give my kids phones till they were in high school. The president, Jim Stiers of Common Sense Media, he was pressed, what age should I give my kid a phone? What age? And he was like, well, it depends on the kid. What age did you give your kids a phone, Jim? He said, when they were in high school and mature enough to make these decisions. So the thing is, a lot of parents, it's okay to delay this and say, guess what? I'm going to save you a lot of grief. And, or can I have Snapchat? Hey, you know what? You're 12. Sorry, it's against the law. We can't. And that's one of the first steps parents can do, is delay that. Now I know there's a lot of parents that are going, hey, my kids are 14, they're 15. What am I supposed to do though? Because I mean, now they can be on it. Well, let me tell you I'll tell you the advice, not my advice, the advice of the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American Psychological Association. Pull those devices out of the bedrooms. As a matter of fact, they've had a good run all during the day. They don't need it in their bedroom at night. American Academy of Pediatrics says, hey, you know, at nighttime, that's a great time to charge the phones of your kids. So, I mean, as mom and dad say, hey, this is a free service we provide in our house. I'm going to take your little device that is so tuckered out from being so used during the day, and I'm going to give you a fresh charge for tomorrow morning, and literally charge it in your bedroom. As a matter of fact, mom and dad, I would say put it on your nightstand and charge it, and then crush a light bulb on the ground approaching that, right? No, I'm just kidding. You don't need to do that. But your kids want to get to that device very badly. And there's things we can do as a parent to say, hey, you know what? I'm not denying you of a phone, but you know, you don't need to be checking it at 2 a.m.
Jonathan, one of the things that you've included in the book is that the teachers and the administrators and the principals don't know what to do. And so you spent a great deal of time, and can still spend a great deal of time, meeting with school leaders in addressing what the school can do in creating an environment and counseling and help and intervention and assistance. What message and what role do the parents play in becoming an active part of their child's school environment? And I'm going to preface that by this story. My executive producer, Jason Bradley, has two wonderful children that he's raised for the past 10 years by himself. Both were very actively involved in their high schools, the daughter being actively involved in the high school marching band. The orchestra has a full scholarship to the University of Alabama, where she's actively involved in the $1 Million Band and in the orchestra. And he made his presence known at every event. He videoed it as a professional videographer, and he was always there. And they found their identity in the groups that they were involved in, and he helped guide them to healthy, engaged extracurricular activities where there were, you know, the big guy that plays the tuba is probably being picked on in the natural for being the big kid the overweight kid, but he's a tuba player and he's loved and revered in the band. And so he's joined together with like-minded, maybe uniquely skilled or gifted individuals that may not fit in other places, but the school can play a part. And as a parent, Jason played a part in helping his children form an identity based on various skills and attributes that they had. She was an academic scholar as well as a musical scholar, and is finding a great deal of satisfaction in transitioning. A little bit of difficult transition in her first couple of months of freshman year of college, of coming from that insulated bubble environment into a larger bubble environment and trying to navigate their way around it. But I have found that these groups that find a bond have less of a bullying issue than those that are the lone wolves or those that have been called out and isolated. So can the school play a part in helping create an environment of engagement, or school counseling providing an opportunity for honing in on one who's become a loner or exhibits those kind of traits, and get them involved in something that's going to give them kind of shore up their identity?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's things that schools and parents can do, and you keep using the word identity, and that's a key word, because today's young people are searching and trying to figure out, who am I? And they're searching for that answer sometimes in a lot of the wrong places. The interesting thing when it comes to bullying is there's been studies out there that show that literally one friend, one kid befriending that lonely, isolated kid, one kid can make a difference. They don't have to even have a bunch of friends, you know, they have to have 5 or more. No, no, no. One friend can make a difference between that downward spiral that a kid goes on, where they start feeling alone and isolated. And I know that feeling, because I know times where I was at school where I literally had nobody, not one person, just wishing there was one person that I could, at recess or when it got to middle school, at lunch, have. And I was, you know, on campus. I told you I'm on campus every week. And I was talking with the principal, and we were standing out there at lunch, and I said, tell me about that kid, because I see this one kid, glasses, backpack, kind of a little nerdy. I go, tell me about him. He's alone over there. Oh yeah, he's a gamer. He's, you know, very kind of, and it's funny, there's a lot of kids that are gamers, sports, whatever. He's kind of more of a nerdy kid, whatever. There's always that a loner kid. What can a school do? I interviewed a school that did this amazing. There's so many different things we could do. That's why I spent a whole chapter on it. But let me just highlight one. One thing a school can do is be proactive about putting mentors, peer mentors in kids' lives. I talked with a school out of Virginia that has a peer mentor program, and it was phenomenal. What they did is they took upperclassmen that were in a leadership class. I actually spoke to a leadership class 2 days ago at a school, went in there, and it's kind of, a lot of schools will have them. They kind of take kids that, you know, literally they call it like the leaders, and they get special t-shirts or whatever. Well, in their leadership class at this school in Virginia, these leaders, part of what they do is they mentor a kid that's a younger classman. And the neat thing is the principal and vice principal select kids that are that lonely kid who's alone on campus, who they've noticed that, and they'll provide this peer, and I forget what they even called it, but it's this peer program they have. And this kid will eat lunch with one of these younger classmen once a week. And they actually saw a lot of friendships kick up, and they tell these mentors, hey, you know what? This might not be an easy conversation. Anybody who's grown up in the church today, we in youth group have heard that one youth group talk about, oh, you know, just be Jesus to a kid. Go sit and eat lunch with a kid. And you know what's funny? A lot of people will feel convicted. They'll be like, I'll try it. And what happens is they sit down with that bullied kid, and you know what happens? And nobody's talking about this, but I'll be honest. You know what happens? It doesn't go well. You know why? You got a very socially awkward kid who's skeptical. I was there. I know the feeling. And when a kid even sits down with you, you're thinking, is a prank coming? Is this real? And you know what you do? You're mean, you're awkward, and plus you don't have any friends, so you're not used to talking. And today's kids talk even worse because they're so used to talking through this thing. They don't know how to talk without slapping an emoji on there. And so it doesn't go well. And this kid who was compelled to go be nice to the kid walks away and goes, I'm not going to try that again because it's tough. And these peer mentor programs actually train kids, hey, guess what? This might be difficult, and that's okay. And they teach empathy. They teach seeking to understand. They teach Philippians 2, considering others better than yourselves. And it's funny, when I speak at secular school assemblies, I will teach that, but I just won't tell them where I got it. A wise man once said, and he could do that because you can't talk about God in a school
Right.
assembly. You wouldn't want to give good advice. So, but it's fascinating to see how well that works. And that's why in his book, I mean, so much what I talk about is there's bullies, there's the bullied, and there's the bystander. Which is your kid? That's something a parent needs to think about. And you know what? There's a lot of bystanders out there. And we can equip those bystanders to make a difference in the life of another kid. They can actually save a kid's life by befriending them.
Jonathan, is there a statistic that tells us the trend girls to boys? Is this more prevalent among girls than it is among boys? Does it have more impact? Is there a more dramatic response to bullying by a young girl than there is by a young boy, or is the reverse of that true? Is there something in the social construct? Because a girl's identity, is a lot of times much more outward, and a guy's identity, may be based on his interests, and the appearance isn't really the factor. It's the awkwardness. So, is there any dynamic or any statistic?
Good question. That's a good question, because when it comes to like how many kids are bullied, very often most of the statistics will just be like the one from stopbullying.government, which is the one that 70% of young people say they've seen bullying at their school. USA Today did a report even in this last year saying that just over 50% of kids said I've been bullied. And it's funny, they never differentiate gender there. What you do see, and what experts have noticed, is the different type of bullying that happens. Because, like, for instance, girls typically engage in kind of like drama and social power plays, belittling, ostracizing. Oh, she's going to try to sit with us, huh? Nope. And the kind of harassing happens. With guys, it tends to be a little more physical. That stiff shoulder, the slap in the back of the neck, the pushing and hitting is going to build it. Now, that's rule of thumb. We definitely see that from either, but that's what it typically tends to be. It's interesting that the suicide rate right now was higher among teen girls than with young guys. So it's affecting them a lot with this device for sure, where it's affecting young people too. You see the self-esteem things. It's funny how body image with girls, you think it's so much about their looks, but with guys, they're like, how come I don't have Justin Bieber's abs? And so this is a real issue for both genders. But yeah, we do see those power plays take place a little bit different with each gender.
Well, there's comfort in that because you and I both have Justin Bieber's abs and Dan Aykroyd's abs, and we have a collection of abs that
my abs are just covered by a layer of fat. So.
Well, there you go. So we call that a 12-pack.
That's right.
Jonathan, I'd actually like you to speak to our audience, our adults, speak to the parents of those that are bullied. We're at an hour that the replays will be watched by the educators, and a message to them. What kind of programs, and we have, and I'm actually an educator. I have a BS in education, and I'm a teacher. That's what I'm known as a teacher. And we have a responsibility as teachers to innovate and to engage and to kind of set the tone. And we are in the position of being influencers. And there's a lot of teaching. Parents are teachers, teachers are teachers, principals are teachers, friends are teachers. What can we do right now that's going to have an immediate positive impact as a first step towards engaging in this. And I think the bystander role, I think, is the most condemning of all roles, because that is the parable of the Good Samaritan. They're the ones that walk by the wounded one and just look and shake their heads. Or they look on and just say that maybe they don't even think anything of it. Maybe they're insulated from it. It doesn't affect me. Hey, if they're picking on them, they're leaving me alone. What message do you have that's going to be a wake-up call that says, look, I know you don't have a lot of tools, but I've got a tool for you, and the tools contained in this book and in the resources found on the website, which is thesourceforparents.com. That's the number 4, where there are resources for parents. But what about for the educators and for the bystanders? What would be the message for them?
Yeah, you know what? You're so right. And when it comes to bystanders, it's funny. As a matter of fact, I can't help but think of the Martin Luther quote. I don't know it offhand, but it's on the cover of my book, Bystanders. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." And I think of that because it would be so neat to see the bystanders not do what their name implies, stand by, but actually stand up and make a difference. That's why I made sure in the book, The Bullying Breakthrough, to spend a whole chapter talking about what we as parents and teachers could do to help the bystanders. That's why I spent an entire chapter just, hey, teachers and principals, here's some of the things that you can actually do. What are some of those things? Things like the peer counseling program that we talked about. But some of the other things we can do is going beyond the typical school assembly. I do lots of school assemblies. They usher me in, the bell rings, I talk for, I tell my story, make them laugh, give them that you can make a difference speech and all that. And a lot of them are like, cool. Boop, bell rings, back to normal. There's a program out here that is now going across the nation that was started actually out here in California called Point Break. And Point Break is a school assembly that is ready for it, brace yourselves, a day long. And it's like this giant self-esteem. The best way that people would even understand is if they remember the movie Mean Girls. Mean Girls, it got to be so bad that the principal, Tina Fey, takes and has the school assembly where they do like all these trust things and all this different stuff. And it was funny how they kind of actually even, they were trying to nip it in the bud and work with it. And they didn't really know what was going on. Point Break is basically a way that schools are effectively doing this, and they literally take kids by class, they put them in there, and it's a day of kind of games, interactions, small groups, and throughout the day there's these speakers who speak on this, and then you go back to the small group and you discuss it, you talk about it, and it's a day focused on and they don't even use the word bullying too much. It's like things like how we treat others, talk a lot about good mental health, this kind of stuff. And it's amazing how you start, seeing bullies in tears at this event because they're sitting in a group listening to other people share stories. And a lot of them, you can almost see the light bulb go off of, I didn't even realize this. So, there's things we can do as schools to go beyond the typical assembly, we need to take this claim seriously. And there's other things we could do simply too. One of the things I talk to schools a lot about is having a presence in the hallways and the classrooms in these places where this stuff is happening, because a lot of teachers aren't doing that.
Right.
So,
well, we so appreciate Jonathan McKee, not just for this book, Bullying, but the Teen's Guide to Social Media and Mobile Devices. You can catch that replay on our YouTube channel at Igniting a Nation. And you can get this book by going to the Books and Media page on ignitinganation.com, click on Books and Media, and get The Bullying Breakthrough by Jonathan McKee. This affects parents, teachers, students, principals, future parents, how you can create an environment from day one in how to even approach what it is to equip your child for the school that they're about to go to. Jonathan McKee, thank you again for another great interview.
Hey, thanks so much. Good conversation.
God bless. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.